Hey folks, it's Patriot Nurse, and in today's segment I'm here with Yoel Halevi. Hi Yoel. And I'm here in Israel. I wanted to ask Yoel some questions regarding, well, really Israel and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. There's a lot that we don't get in the States, for sure, from the media. There's a lot of different perspectives that we just don't see. And pardon my voice, by the way, I've had a cold since the very first day that I got over here. So it's now starting to leave me, but I sound like, you know, a little bit of a chain smoker, so pardon me. But I wanted to ask Yoel, because Yoel, in addition to being born in the land, Yoel has a pretty deep background in understanding of history, but also an understanding of Middle Eastern texts. And I'm going, well, why don't you tell them about your background? What's your educational background, Yoel?
Okay, so I have been studying Near Eastern texts, ancient Near Eastern texts for the past 10 years, approximately. Wow. Ancient treaties, mentality, culture, religion. I teach biblical studies as well. I'm actually doing a bachelor's in history and biblical studies at the moment. I majored in history in high school, which means I studied a lot of the what's referred to as Zionist history. And I've basically been all over the country. So I've been in Judea, I've been in Samaria, what people mistakenly call the West Bank, and I'm very against that name.
Which I did use, by the way, in a previous video, so I apparently misstepped there. Go ahead. So go with the background. Yeah.
I go around collecting opinions. I ask anyone I can meet, Jewish, Arab, visitors from outside of Israel, to see what they know about things. So I've kind of realized that there's a lot of misunderstanding, and the point is that because I'm just a citizen of the state of Israel, not someone, for example, from the foreign ministry or something like that, where you can claim there's an agenda, I want to try to explain as much as possible with a non-biased opinion exactly what's going on here, because I don't really watch American news. I only really listen to the Israeli news, and I can follow. You can follow two different narratives. You can actually watch the same thing in two different places. It looks very, very different.
That's true.
Okay, so the first thing I would say to anyone, you know, if you know anything about information, learn not to trust anyone. Okay, no matter what you do. I mean, for example, if you go to a classroom and you're learning from a teacher, you're dependent on what that teacher tells you. You also have to trust your own gut and your own experience on things. And I'm saying this as a future historian, as a teacher by myself. I teach people. I've seen the issue of disinformation, specifically with biblical Hebrew. A lot of nonsense that goes out there with people I work with, what they learn from teachers. I deliberately do this because we're talking about people who are not trained to teach anything. They just come up with ideas. And really, whatever you see on the news, I mean, it can be a half truth. That's really the point. And really what we're dealing with here in the state of Israel, and the issue with, I'm going to be very non-politically correct here and say the so-called Palestinians, and I'm going to explain why I say that. Okay, because it's so cold, because I can show you recordings of people who call themselves Palestinians back from 1990s, 1980s, where they openly admit there is no such thing as Palestinians. Ahmed Tibi, for example, who's actually a member of Knesset, was caught in 1999 saying clearly there is no such thing as Palestinians. And he is a big advocate of the whole Palestinian narrative. Okay, so it's not exactly what people think it is.
Okay, so I got to ask a question here then. For average people, like in America, we've established, you know, per Yoel, we've established that we need to be very discerning about our news and where we get our news sources. What are some things, I guess, that if I was sitting out there, like for my viewers out there, what should they know about the culture here in the Middle East that maybe they're not getting? Where is the disconnect here? Is there something that they should know about the way things happen that we're just not getting in the West?
Lie, lie, and lie again. That is the mentality in the Middle East. Kings did it, people did it, and most definitely Arabs do it. Okay, I have nothing personal against Arabs. I actually have Arab friends. And I think one of the biggest jokes that happened was when I was about 16 years old. I had a guy who used to take me to school every day. Stop in front of the house, take me to school. He was part of an agency used to take children to the schools if they studied outside of the town. And I remember I asked him, what do you think about, you know, as an Arab, as I can presume someone identifies with being Palestinian, and he immediately picked up his hand. He almost braked the car. He almost like hit the brakes and said, "Never in your right mind ever call me a Palestinian." And I gave him the weirdest look ever, and I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "We are not Palestinians." And I was very, very confused, and that made me, that time made me think. Because I grew up in a household where we were not too involved in the whole Israeli-Palestinian issue. We were aware of it, but my family, my dad at the time, now that he knows better, he understands the politics better, he's switched his mind a little, but my dad was saying, yes, we should give back the Gaza Strip, we should get out of certain areas, there's no point of being there. Okay, so that's the kind of mentality I grew up with, and that really...
So you grew up in a mentality where it wasn't like this big sticking point where you weren't taught a particular opinion on the matter, would you say?
It was like, you know, okay, they're there, we're here, let's live together. You know, give them whatever they want, and it's just enough with it. And that made me think when he said that, because what I noticed was that there's actually a split. And I kind of realized, I started looking into it, I actually went to his village to speak with people, which was apparently very dangerous. But I anyhow did it because
This is the Arab that you were in the car with? Okay.
And we entered the village, and most people were actually very nice. When they realized I was Jewish, they actually were very friendly about it. But there's actually, apparently the police doesn't really allow to go into, you know, if you're Jewish, don't go into Arab villages. And there's a reason for that. Okay?
Why can you not go into Arab villages if you're Jewish?
Because it's dangerous. The mentality is that we are the enemy, and basically anyone who's not a Muslim is the enemy.
In Israel, it's like this.
Well, with tourists, when they come here, they want your money, so they're friendly to you. They're you'll be surprised, they're extremely nice to you, but when you hear in Arabic what they say about you, or what they say behind your back when you leave, you know, it's pretty dirty and pretty nasty. I want to be very, very clear about that. I've seen Arabs try to hit on women tourists in some of the sleaziest ways you'd ever imagine. So yeah, there's a lot of disguises, a lot of masks that people wear, and a lot of games. Everything is a game. Arabs have a lot of patience, so they would lie about something, and they say openly, if you lie long enough, it will become a truth. Now, basically the situation here is that today the idea of being a Palestinian is more about politics, less about truth. And I think the most painful thing is that a lot of Arabs just want to live. They just want to live. The problem is they live in places where the Palestinian Authority controls those areas.
Well, from your perspective, let me ask you this. From your perspective, if you were to ascribe maybe a percentage, what percentage would you say of people who would be called Arabs, what percentage just want to live and they don't care about the politics?
I think it's very difficult to know, because to do a poll inside an area where it is military controlled, I mean, we're talking about a situation like in Hebron, if they catch someone who works, Hebron or Hebron, if they catch someone who works with the IDF, people can get executed. Yeah, you can't. And it's very dangerous. These people are protected by Israel. And the only reason we have these guys is because we are dealing with terrorist activity. If someone goes out and attacks an authority, even if we say, the question is what the situation exactly is. So let's put it this. For example, back in the 1930s, 1940s, there were several Israeli Jewish organizations that fought against the British. If you ask me what I think about these groups, they liberated the land from the British, but essentially they were terrorists. Okay, let's be very, very clear. They were terrorists.
So the original people who established the state of Israel, you think would be called terrorists?
No, not exactly. Okay. These were side groups. Okay. Okay, let's be very clear. There were three basic groups. Okay. There were the group who were the leading Zionist movement. They worked with the British, etc. There was the Lehi, the Etzel and the Lehi. The Lehi were, according to the British, terrorists. If you watch the activity they worked through, what they did, they were essentially terrorists. Okay? Now, to start defining exactly what a freedom fighter is, what a terrorist is, it's a tricky business. Because It depends on what perspective you go to. So, for example, the British would say they were terrorists. You ask an Israeli, he'll say, no, they were heroes of the state of Israel. Same situation with the Arabs here. You ask them about Hamas, Fatah, whatever, the Al-Aqsa Brigade, whatever it is. You ask an Arab, he'll say, oh, they're freedom fighters. You ask the Israelis, he said, they're terrorists.
So basically, it's which viewpoint are you looking from?
Exactly. I'm not really saying what I think about things. I'm saying it depends how you look at things. Okay? It really depends how you look at things. And that's the big issue.